we're going to begin with what we just touched upon in our second briefing. During our second briefing, we said the major operation was almost over, and reconstruction of Tigray and bringing criminals to justice would soon resume. So our first objective, which was coined as three major objectives, that was ensuring and upholding rule of law and upholding constitution and defending our soldiers, and also destroying the armaments which might cause massive destruction against people and properties, and to bring criminal suspects to justice was major objectives. That was over. The final, the medium objective in the second phase was to also liberate Mekelle and to finalize major military operation. That's also is over. We are now with our last and sustaining phase of the operation, which mainly is to apprehend suspects to justice. Second, to instate interim administration, which guides and leads grassroots discussions, community discussions, and make sure the social and economic activities would resume, like markets, banks, and schools and health facilities, and services would resume soon. And now in many cities, this interim administration has already been constituted. There are only few major cities and towns which are yet to be addressed, like Mekelle, Aksum, Adwa, and Adigrat. In these towns, very soon the interim administration will be constituted, and the public grassroots discussion will begin. In other smaller towns, already the administration has been set up, and but the public has begun discussing. The third point of this final phase is to reconstruct and rehabilitate the devastated infrastructure, like telecom, which was actually not only cut off just the communication, but also in several cities and towns, the fiber optics was destructed, and then that fiber optics has to be reconnected. Also rehabilitating the power generation is another impediment for the public to begin enjoying the daily life with power. That's also a difficulty. And then in many cities, smaller towns and cities, it has already been reconnected. In major cities like in Mekelle, yet a work has to be done in the coming few weeks. A contingency team has already been sent to Mekelle and Aksum and Adigrat to make sure that both telephone, power, and roads are reconnected and reconstructed. Also, as you might have been aware, number of roads have been damaged. Number of bridges has been destroyed. Now, so finding a temporary bridge and then also the rehabilitating the roads is a work also to be done in the coming few days and weeks. Some may take also months to put in place a permanent infrastructure there. Apprehending the criminals, as you might have been aware, few of the senior leadership have already been apprehended, like the former House of Speaker, Keria, and the former also Deputy Administrator of Tigray region, Ambassador have already been apprehended. Then the hunt for the rest is continued as the military and the police force have already announced that the hideouts whereabouts are already identified, and the chase is continued. So the both institutions would believe it would be a matter of days or few days or weeks before most of them would be apprehended. The other aspect, which you might have also been aware, there had been sporadic shootings here and there, which are not uncommon, of course, not only in that area, but also elsewhere. It is also now being controlled. We may hear few remnants of the militia and the special forces because we've not yet controlled every neighborhood because it takes to constitute interim administration because of the chaos. The former administration has been collapsed, and now in every village, in every kabale and neighborhoods, so the public has to come up and administration has to be established so that the petty crimes could be controlled. So these are the major tasks that are remained. With regards to humanitarian action, disbursement of food and medical items have already begun last week in smaller cities. I think this week the major cities could also be addressed. Now the expert and the boss in that area is now with me, His Excellency Miteku. Most of you might have been familiar with him. Now he's the senior leadership in the humanitarian action and that Ethiopia has to deal with. So he can address most of your queries if you have with regards to the humanitarian action. So without further ado, I will leave the floor for him, and then he will raise major points you might be of interest, and then we'll also leave the floor for you to raise questions which might need further explanations.
On November 29, 2020, which aims to boost prospects for safe, efficient and effective delivery of food and non-food items to the needy one. It is government-led and it is government operation. So as we may know, we do have rich and well-tested coordination mechanism across the country since the El Nino-induced drought, which struck a number of regional states in 2015 to 2016. Following this drought, there was Indian Ocean dipole drought in south and southeastern part of Ethiopia. So the coordination mechanism is well tested, and it serves as a platform to bring all government line ministries, UN agencies, bilaterals, and international NGOs. So it is simply to add focus for both government line ministries and international partners to work together to speed up food and non-food supply to Tigray region, border areas of Amara and Afar. This is the purpose of the agreement which was made between the government and United Nations. Second, I want to focus on coordination mechanism. It is key and vital. Unless we do have robust and vibrant coordination mechanism, it would be futile exercise for all partners, including government line ministries. So that we have, as I mentioned earlier, well-tested coordination mechanism. The coordination mechanism is based on cluster approach. We do have 10 clusters. I would like to mention the name of the clusters because it helps for you to communicate both line ministries as well as partners which are working on each cluster. Agriculture and livestock, water and sanitation, health, nutrition, food, logistics, non-food items and shelter, children and women protection, education and site management. For instance, water and sanitation, co-chaired by Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy, and UNICEF, respectively. Because UNICEF, it has a major stake in the water and sanitation sector. In this cluster, we have NGOs, international NGOs, like Oxfam GB, Gold Ethiopia, and others. So each cluster serves as a platform, as I mentioned earlier, to bring the efforts of both line ministry and all institutions or partners which are working in the areas of water and sanitation. The same holds true for the remaining clusters. This is the way we are handling emergency response whenever we do have rapid onset disasters as well as slow onset disasters. This is the coordination mechanism. Second, key members of the cluster are represented in the Emergency Coordination Center. You know well about Emergency Coordination Center. It is an international standard. It brings all partners in one platform, in one room, to coordinate well all efforts of food and non-food supply. So key members of clusters are represented in the Emergency Coordination Center, which is hosted at the National Disaster Risk Management Commission. So they are working for 7 days and 24 hours, through which we are able to coordinate all efforts, as I mentioned earlier, to deliver food and non-food items to the needy one. Given the urgency of the current condition, this Emergency Coordination Center is working closely with the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Committee. According to the National Disaster Risk Management Policy and Strategy, there are line ministries which are designated as a lead agency, which are working with the international partners, are represented as a member of the National Committee. So the National Committee currently has frequent meeting, virtually on everyday basis and physically on weekly basis. So this helps us to give direction, to decide that decision and direction implemented by the Emergency Coordination Center, which is hosted, as I mentioned earlier, as the National Disaster Risk Management Commission. This is the way that we are handling all emergencies, including the current one. When I proceed to humanitarian assistance, as you know, it is a basic issue because we have to respond as quickly as possible in order to save the lives of the needy population. So from the government side, the government has started earlier, as mentioned earlier by His Excellency, Ambassador Redwan. So currently, we are able to dispatch non-food and food items to deliver for more than 250,000 people in the region. So most of the commodities have already reached major sites in the region. We deploy around 8 coordination teams, which are drawn from a member of the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Committee to coordinate and facilitate the delivery of the food and non-food items to the needy one. This arrangement is not the first one. We do have rich experience while we were managing the Gedeo-Guji conflict and other conflicts after Gedeo-Guji operation. So the 8 team, which are deployed to major sites, currently are working strongly to facilitate the delivery of food and non-food items to the needy one. So our effort will continue. Now we are closely working with international partners based on the clusters that I mentioned earlier. These are the overall pictures that I want to give you at this briefing session. Thank you.
The police custody, they are giving their testimony of the predicaments and the ongoing situation. So police, with regards to an agreement granted to allow UN access, and also why there are calls that UN still has limited access. We want the story to be clear here. What we meant when we entered into agreement was the whole operation will be led and coordinated by Ethiopian government. Now, of course, they are free. So this must be clear that this is Ethiopia, a country which has thousands of years of statehood. So no one can have a free ride. If anybody is told not to go, then they have to abide by. You cannot deny the government warning and then try to roughshod on everybody. no staff, from whatever corner it comes, whatever background it has to respect the government's order. When the government believes that a certain area is not safe anymore, then people should stop there. That also works for UN. The agreement that we entered was in a belief that UN would collaborate with us, and we, the government, would call the shots. So we coordinate, we lead, but we need assistance and partner. For some partners to drive alone, to move alone, to roam alone, is not allowed. There is no such a thing as unfettered access in every corner of Ethiopia. It is led by the government, and then everybody should listen to the government, where to go and where not to go. You can only have unfettered access when you reach to no man's land, and this is not no man's land. This is a country of a sovereign nation. This is a country of a government who functions. This is a country whose government is used to for all sorts of difficulties. Now, because we said there are some sporadic shootings, not war, as some of you would like to call it. It's not a war. A sporadic shooting is common not only in Tigray. Sporadic shooting is there in Matakel, in Benshangul, in Oromia. So what we hear in Tigray is not something that is special of its kind, something that does not stand alone. We are used to shootouts with some disgruntled elements, and we made it clear there are some remnants of the special forces and militia who have not yet surrendered, who somehow made it to mingle with the public, who somehow made it to hide out in certain bushes, even though they may not have some regular leadership and command and supply of resources, but they can still keep on shooting until they run out of their ammunition. So that's why we say this is a police work. It's not military operation. It's not that combating, but the kind of hooligan, a kind of an outlaw sort of shooting you might have. But if you are escorted by the military, then it would be safe. That's why still our humanitarian assistance has to be escorted with defense forces. The first time when they traveled with less convoy, they were ambushed. Second time, what we did was we had to reinforce the convoy. So it doesn't mean that we don't hear about shootings. Hearing shooting doesn't mean we are at all war. Hearing shooting doesn't mean that we are combating entirely. Shooting you can hear in towns. Shooting you can hear in several parts of Ethiopia. Shooting is not uncommon. Shooting you are common even in Western cities and in schools. So you can have any disgruntled element to just shoot at somebody. Particularly in this case, but you can also address it. The stores of humanitarian assistance for even Eritreans was looted. Now, when we try to replenish it, then they have to make sure that assistance would not reach to the public because that would help to the leadership to paint humanitarian crisis. Now, people were saying, okay, the Ethiopian government would not afford to fight with TPLF, that the war would be prolonged, and then if the war would be prolonged, then it would descend the country into quagmire. Then the plausible recourse was to sit down and negotiate. We said we can finish it within a short period of time, and we did it within 3 weeks. So that's the surprise of our partners. Now there are some people, okay, yes, they are defeated, they are on the run, but still they think they will regroup and then begin guerrilla fighting. You are saying that's not going to happen either. So now the third question, which people still keep on pushing, some out of their deep pocket, some out of their sheer fear, that the government still have to sit down and negotiate because when this operation will continue, there will be humanitarian crisis. And now we are trying our level best not to see that. So by all means possible, we will disperse food and medical items to all corners of Tigray, while we will be escorted by our defense forces. So that is what the government is pledging and then actually making sure is happening. So UN will have given access, and it has given access, but only whenever the government reaches, then UN reaches. Whenever the government says that it is not yet safe, then it has to be heard. That's what we are saying. When do you allow independent investigation? Again, it goes with what I said. We will allow independent investigation when we feel we fail. When the Ethiopian government feels that it failed to investigate, we will invite others to assist us. To assume that Ethiopia doesn't have a functional government, and to anybody to assume that it can come and do the things that we cannot do, is belittling the government. Ethiopia is being run by a strong, functional government which knows how to govern a nation. It doesn't need a babysitter. So any entity should wait until we invite for an independent investigation. No one would be concerned more than that we are concerned about ourselves. What happened in Tigray, what happened in Maikadra, happened on us, happened to us, happened by us. So we know how to investigate and we'll bring the evidence. The first entity, the first body that Ethiopian government is accountable for is Ethiopian people. And then we'll produce the evidence because evidence is being produced, both in photos and videos and oral testimonies. And then that will be provided to the court. That will be prepared in international standard. And that will be prepared in accordance to our national standard. And then people will judge them. If anybody who might have some suspicion, then they can go through the document, they can go through the verifications and documents and evidences, and then they can ask. But to push aside the government and then to begin investigation of a certain alien is not allowed because this is not a colony, a former colony or a current colony. This is an ancient country who runs its affairs for thousands of years. So we've been through up and downs, we've been through turns and twists, and we can handle this one too, because we handled more severe atrocity than this one too. So it has to be weighted, it has to be listened to the government when and how it will be obliged to seek for assistance. If we say we can handle it, then others should wait and listen, and then see and witness as how we can handle it. So that's how it has to go. To many bottlenecks, yes, there are bottlenecks, and it's the nature of such a conflict. It's not a normal circumstance. That was an operation to oust one of the staunchest, the strongest, well-armed, well-entrenched entity who had been governing the entire region, and to oust every element, particularly those armed ones and those who were calling the shots, is not an easy task. So it was only because the Ethiopian government was effective enough to have done so in a swift manner. So just because we managed to bring the operation to an end within 3 weeks doesn't mean that we were in a picnic. It was very, very tough assignment. It was very tough operation, but because the government was very much cautious and very much caring about the lives of people and about the properties, the public properties, that under that 3 weeks of operation, both on the ground and airstrike, that the other side could not produce a single life that were passed away due to the strike. I'm not saying there were not people died. There were people massacred in their hundreds. There were soldiers which were slaughtered and stabbed and beaten to death by whatever that the forces had at their disposal. And also there might be some people who actually might be killed due to crossfire. So we are not ruling out that no individual have actually lost his or her life during this operation. What we meant was, during the air operation, because the only place that you might have seen is a certain shanty house in the suburbs of Mekelle, which was partly destroyed. That is the only property that the TPLF leadership could produce. Now, if a single individual was dead out of the airstrike, you could have added on your screen photos on the background of every media, and that could have been the poster child. So it's not they mean to spare us. If our strike killed anybody, that would have been a news, the headline in every media, in every NGO. Why didn't they come up with those photos? Because there was none. We are not saying that not people killed. People could be killed out of crossfire, out of missing targets during the ground operation. So that we could come up, and then we would just keep on counting. We just keep on discovering both hospitals and elsewhere, because they are all people, and then every life matters. So every life that's lost, every people that lost a body or wounded have to be known. Just because we have to know to mourn, and we have to know to assist those who are wounded and still alive. So it's not to be accountable to anybody other than Ethiopians, because they are our compatriots, because they are our people, because they are sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers or cousins. We care. It doesn't matter whether anybody was shot at from our soldiers or killed by militia and special force of Tigray. They are all Ethiopians, and we care. We were not fighting with a foreign enemy. It was a family feud. Some went astray, just became rogue, and like any rogue element kills his family, and then they began killing us, and then we have to subdue them. It was unfortunate. We never be happy. Now the operation is over, and then you see nobody celebrating, particularly in the government, because it's a loss, an Ethiopian loss. Any life that is lost is a loss, a minus to Ethiopians. So we are not hiding that anybody who is killed by the airstrike, just because there was none, that we had to stick to the fact. So now we are pushing the cities and towns whereby media can easily go and access reporters. The first phase was like in the Kobo area and in Gondar area. I think very soon we'll make sure when the interim administration is actually established and then begin running business smoothly, then we will also try to expand it like to other areas which go deeper to Tigray. And maybe very soon, if the interim administration will be established in Tigray and other major areas, then it becomes easier. So our hope is both media and donor agencies would make it easier to talk to somebody who have public authority. And then now interim government is trying to maintain the local, both the Kabale and Warada administration and council members, which have been serving during the TPLF time. Because as it's been said time and again, the government is actually looking after the very top echelon, which are already suspected of up to some criminal activities. Otherwise, the lower echelon, both in the Kabale and Warada, by and large, they could still be allowed to serve, except for those who somehow flee out of fear or out of involvement in some criminal activities. So that would expedite the activity of establishing the interim administration. So once that's established in most of the states, and then it begins running smoothly, its daily business, then you will have somebody to talk to. Otherwise, even though the major fighting is not going on, then there is no somebody who would readily would talk to, and then you will end up in all sorts of confusion. So, and then you may have some generals in some cities and towns, and they are busy looking after the criminals and trying to make sure that no any further criminal activity would actually be allowed in the city. So instead of talking to soldiers and their generals, it would be easier for you to talk to somebody who would explain what happened earlier and then what's going on, so what might be the plan in the future. So these are the only reasons that we are not somehow comfortable to let everybody go in which direction with their whims and caprice. So it has to be planned, it has to be safe. Then there has to be somebody who would explain and guide you. And then now we are moving forward into deeper towns and cities. I think by early next week, then we'll notify you again some other additional towns and cities whereby you can easily go and then talk to anybody which might be of your interest. So these are the only questions. Otherwise, there isn't something that we don't want you to get access to. The only problem is there is no one who would take care of you. Then you'll end up in being ambushed. And then even some hooligans, the city hooligans, because you know it's only now that food assistance is going. For about a month, then there was no one to look after and support people in the towns and cities. And then, as you might have also been aware, in many towns and cities, there were people who used to live on daily basis to get something and then go to like services shops and supermarkets and buy something and eat. Now those are closed. And then you might not know what will happen even to you, particularly the foreigners. You will be an easy prey. And then it becomes a news enough. And instead of taking care of our own business, and then we'll be forced to explain as to what happened to you. And then you may not want it. So it's good for us to make sure that cities are safe. And then we allow you. So you can discover whatever happened, even though you go tomorrow or next month or next week. Don't worry, if something wrong happened, then you won't miss it. So it's only good things which have a short memory. If there are something went wrong, then you can unearth it. You can discover it. So it could not be hidden anyway. So we'll allow you. It's only for your safety and then for the right information to be garnered from the right person. Once we make sure that happens, and you've had access to go everywhere in Ethiopia when we feel it is safe, and then we'll definitely make sure that it's going to happen very much soon, and then we will celebrate when it's over.
We had 1.8 million beneficiaries, 110 IDP, 110,000 IDP, 600,000 relief, and 1.1 million PSNP Productive Safety Net Program. So the sum of the whole beneficiaries is 1.8. In my view, additional beneficiaries may need emergency assistance. So that now we have a plan to undertake rapid assessment to capture additional number of beneficiaries in rural area, as well as we believe that 20 to 30% of urban poor may need relief assistance for a short period of time until the urban market works well. So that the rapid assessment will add additional number of beneficiaries to the existing one. For Ohio, we are sticking on the existing number of beneficiaries, 1.8. Now our plan is entirely focusing on the 1.8 million beneficiaries. While we are working on the existing number, we will try to capture additional number of beneficiaries based on joint rapid assessment with our international partners. So take 1.8 million beneficiaries as a number of beneficiaries for a while. Second, regarding the composition of the food items, non-food items, as well as the areas we are responding. As you may know, we do have food distribution sites these food distribution sites may not work currently because we have to identify which food distribution sites works well and which are not work for a while. Because to identify the functional food distribution points, we have to have interim administration at all level, because interim administration is the first entry point to facilitate food distribution, as well as to identify appropriate food distribution sites, if any, given the current status of the humanitarian need. So for a while, we are working on central, western, and southern part of Tigray. So the major sites which are selected as central, western, and southern part are serving as a hub. We dispose or we preposition all food and non-food items at these three areas. Then the remaining areas are outreached from these hubs, be it urban areas or towns and rural kabbales. So this is the arrangement currently we are working on. Regarding the composition of the food item, it comprises wheat, pulse, edible oil, CSCB, corn blended. It is supporting nutrition food, which is intended to children under 5 and lactating and pregnant women. So that this amount or composition of the food is expected to give 2,200 kilocalorie per person per day. This is international standard of food composition, which is made clear by WFP internationally. So we follow this standard to address the needy ones across the country. Third, on the access issue, I think it went well by His Excellency Ambassador. I would add some critical points on the access issue. I think in the Ethiopian context, it is not new for us. Access issue, coordination, it is not new. We have passed a number of challenges in drought, in flood, in conflict. Even we can share best practices to a number of countries. Of course, we are doing so. So, in the agreement, in the actual existing coordination mechanism, it is government-led. The government should lead. It is our country principle. It should be government-led. Every activity, every mission should be joint. We stick on this approach. So, under the Ministry of Peace, we are discussing thoroughly with resident coordinator how to facilitate access issue in areas which are safe. So, all partners should align their resources with the government. Now we are using military escort in some areas. We are using convoy so that any UN, bilateral, and international NGO can align their resource with the government, maintaining their areas of operation. We don't need to mix the areas of operation because they do have their own waradas, they do have their own areas of operation. We don't need to compromise it. Otherwise, we can avail convoy, we can avail military escorting to reach to the point where they are providing food and non-food items to the needy one. This approach, this is the case that we are discussing time and again with the partners. Second, this problem might be solved within 15 days, 15 days, because we are working strongly, because the government can pave the way how to address the food and non-food supply to the needy one. Once we pave the way, all partners should follow. the government line. This is the way out to solve the current problem. The final one, the duration, how long we are providing emergency assistance in rural and urban area. I think this emergency assistance will continue for the year 2021 based on rapid assessment. Second, we will be deploying multi-agency team comprising line ministries, UN agencies, bilaterals and international NGOs to Meher producing area and pastoral area. So this team is expected to come up with new figure for 2021. So this figure for 2021 it will be official figure for both the government line ministries as well as partners to respond. Second, the emergency supply or humanitarian assistance should be accompanied by rehabilitation, reconstruction program, unless we will not be able to fully address the request of the needy population. So that following the humanitarian assistance, we will continue rehabilitation or reconstruction of major economic and social infrastructures, as well as damaged schools, health facilities, water and sanitation institutions, and so on, so that it will continue responding for the needy one beyond 2020. These are the major questions that were raised by